On today's show, the Battle of Alberta begins both on and off the ice. If you're looking for those maple glazed bacon Oreo donuts, the Calgary Stampede has you covered this year. Why can't politicians say nice things about each other? We look at the problem of misinformation and mistrust in the government. And finally, we review the original King Kong. This is Penhole Talk Radio. And welcome back to the show. Thank you for joining us again this week. And if you are new here, welcome. My name is Brian Constantine, and I am here with my co-host, Michael Rowland.
Hello, hello.
And of course, we have to start with big news in Alberta. After 31 years, we finally have it again. The Battle of Alberta is taking place. We have the Calgary Flames and the Edmonton Oilers facing off in the second round of the NHL playoffs. Big news in your world, no doubt, right?
Sure. Had I not caught it on the radio, I think yesterday, I wouldn't even know it was happening.
Right.
I'm not a hockey fan.
Yeah, I'm calling you out. It's interesting because actually, I don't think you're alone. I went on to the Mountain View Today page, so that's kind of the old Innisfail province,
right? Yeah,
newspaper, and they have their own little website poll saying, "Are you planning to watch the Battle of Alberta?" So I click on it, expecting it to be like a 90% yes rate. And it was like 50-50. Like it's only like, 20, 25 votes or something like that. But still.
That used to be a bigger part of Alberta, or at least central Alberta life. Like I remember as a kid.
You're talking about?
No, watching
the hockey.
And involvement with the Alberta and Calgary hockey teams. Like that was a big deal for a lot of people. When I was a kid, everybody made a deal out of Edmonton and Calgary playing.
Yeah. Well, it's been so long since they're both competitive at the same time.
Yeah.
Well, I guess it's been a long time since Edmonton's been competitive, if I'm being honest. Calgary's had its moments. And I go, I'll take a little bit of that back. They have both actually made the Stanley Cup playoffs, or the Stanley Cup finals, I should say, within the last 15 years. I guess it's probably been a little bit more. I think the Edmonton and Calgary went back-to-back years into the Stanley Cup finals. Oh, yeah. Unfortunately, both lost. But yeah, it was back-to-back years. Though I think they're separated by a lockout in between. If my hockey,
that was the lockout year.
I think the lockout year was in between the two. If my hockey history is correct. But yeah, that is more than I can say for this. Again, disappointed Leafs fan. And yes, I'm going to pour out my misery just a little bit in this part, because of course Toronto lost in Game 7 this year to the two-time defending Stanley Cup champions Tampa Bay Lightning, and they only lost Game 7 by one goal. So it was a tight affair. Now here's a stat that came out now, just to give you a sense of what we go through as Leaf fans. No other team in the NHL, NBA, or the Major League Baseball so those are all the Major League sports that have series,
right?
Best of series. No other team has this stat. Toronto has lost the deciding game in the opening round for the last 5 years. So usually that's Game 7. There was that weird lockout year where there's only like Game 5. They only had 5 rounds. But anyways. So for the last 5 years, Toronto has lost Game 7 or Game 5, whatever the series may be, in the last 5 years in the first round. No other Major League team has done that.
They push their way right to the playoffs, and even through those first few games,
I know they get right to the deciding game.
And then they choke right on the last game.
They can't get that over that hump, and they're so close this year. They have such a good team. So yeah. I know there's no one listening to this who's not a Leafs fan that is actually like feeling sorry for me, but there are hopefully other Leaf fans out there who can feel my pain. But anyways, back to Alberta. Enough of that. Back to Alberta. So of course, this has divided the province, ripped it asunder like no other thing.
And us Penhold sitting right in the middle tears the whole town in half.
I am a little concerned. Yeah, we our council at this point is really in jeopardy, I think. The Mike Walsh, a diehard Flames fan, has challenged our mayor to a wager on this series.
Of course.
So, because if you've listened to our podcast with the mayor, he came out as an Oilers fan. He said he kind of kept it low. I'm wondering if he's a little more vocal about it now. But anyways, so the mayor, Mike Yargeau, and Councillor Mike Walsh have put a bet down that each has to wear the other team's jersey if the other person's team wins. So Walsh will have to wear an Oilers fan or Oilers jersey, and Yargeau will have to wear a Flames jersey if their teams lose. And so they'll have to wear those during a council meeting. So, who knows? That might be a council meeting worth tuning into in the future there. So we'll have to see how that plays out. Hopefully this does not produce long-term effects for the entire town should this not end well.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the state of the affairs here in Pennold regarding the Battle of Alberta. All right. So in other news, we have I came across this on Pennold Happenings Facebook page. Someone had shared this link from the story from RD News Now with the headline: Potential solar powered electric vehicle charging station proposed for outside Penhold. And so this company, Ion Charge Corp, out of Calgary, is planning to put an electric charging station basically kind of kitty corner to where Junction 42 station is right now.
Yeah, it looks like they're looking at 2/4 sections right on the southeast corner of that major intersection.
Yeah, directly across the highway.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so think of it. So I think they're planning on having it like if you will, a gas station, but for electric vehicles. So you drive up there and charge your electric vehicle there as you would kind of fill up your gas vehicle.
But doing it all off grid with a 2 megawatt solar facility. So it's a completely disconnected station where all their power is self-generated.
Yeah, so it looks like they have a little kind of mock-up on the news article related to it. It looks like it kind of looks like a mini solar panel farm.
Yeah,
part of that, and then that's all to charge 5. I think they're planning on putting a number of, I can't remember, a few charging stations there. They say they're going to put washrooms, a few amenities, solar canopies to produce added energy. I think there's kind of an interesting one in the article. It mentions how they're actually going to use technology to harness some solar energy as it bounces off the snow.
Why not?
Like seriously,
oh yeah,
like suck it up. Like this is how you're gonna have to do it. And no doubt, anyone who lives around here knows how bright that reflection is off that snow.
Anybody who spent a day skiing and gets sunburnt from below knows that there's a lot of power in that reflection.
Yeah, and so yeah, they're actually looking to aim to get this built by the end of the summer in 2023. So just next year. So this is going through the Red Deer County Council. And so they got to go through all the land permits and updates and that kind of thing. Now just to give you an idea, I think most of us know how long it takes to fill up a vehicle. Not very long when it comes to gas. Here they make the case here to kind of give you an idea of what it would look like. It says, while the price of charging an EV has not yet been established at the Ion stations, the owner of this company says that it will be less expensive than gasoline vehicles, and so they peg it at about $3.03 to charge a particular Honda Kona EV to go 100 kilometers, and then he says a Honda Civic would cost $10.94 to go 100 kilometers.
So yeah, they're looking at under a third of the cost of gas.
So they're claiming it's going to be cheaper, at least for the consumer. And then the charging times would range anywhere from 20 to 40 minutes, depending on, it says, the vehicle's battery capacity. So what it sounds like their plan is to kind of put these electrical charging stations along the Highway 2 corridor at strategic points along the way that kind of match common electric vehicle ranges. And so you could travel up and chill out there for 20, 30 minutes and then move on. Now, I don't know about you, but I just if they don't put restaurants or little fast food stuff here, like you are missing out. You got a captive audience for 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Like, come on, someone there has to be a restaurateur out there who's gonna jump on this.
Well, that's where I found it kind of surprising, the idea of putting this kiddie corner to the Junction 42. Now I know there's not really room at the Junction 42, but you want those people to have access to that facility.
Yeah.
Because you put this kiddie corner and you can't have pedestrian traffic across Highway 2, and you really can't have it across the bridge. So how they can't access, they can't go across to Burger King, Tim Hortons, all the stuff that we've already got over there.
Yeah, you're going to start to see this probably expand out very similar to Gasoline Alley. And I think that was their kind of idea, is to kind of present or create a secondary Gasoline Alley.
Yeah.
And so, I wouldn't be surprised to see it kind of start building up on both sides of the highway. So that's kind of an interesting development there. I'm not ready to jump on board the whole electric vehicle thing yet, but
I can go
you
off
have
for
to do this though. This is the infrastructure that's required if you want mass.
If you think it's going to be mass adopted, and I could go off for a long time on electric vehicles. We don't need to go down that route, but I just look at something like this and I don't see how it's feasible financially. Like, this has to be somehow massively subsidized by government grants and so on, because they're looking at 2 quarter sections of land right along Highway 2. That's valuable land. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's pushing $1.5 to $2 million before you build the infrastructure. And then you're looking at a few dollars to charge vehicles and only charging a half dozen at a time.
Yeah.
How are you going to get enough business to recoup costs on this?
Yeah,
it's
that's the
government
thing, right?
throwing dollars at it is all I can see as a way to fund this.
Yeah. I haven't looked into it, but it's certainly it's not obvious on the surface how this is a massive revenue generator. Like,
and they're saying,
you make a good point. Like, it's one thing, you stop, fill up 5 minutes of gas at most, and you're on the road. Like, you can get a good turnover with that. With this, 20 to 40 minutes per customer your customer has to sit there. That means not only does that customer just kind of sit there and does nothing, but that blocks it from anyone else using that. That's your rate of turnover for customers is not high.
No.
It'll be interesting to see how that turns out. Like, you hope they've done their due diligence to figure out how they can do this, because you don't want it built there and then 10 years down the road it's just kind of forgotten.
Yeah.
We've seen a few of those kind of empty lots start to pop up, unfortunately. But
and like you said, this is it's what's needed if the technology is going to grow, that's people are pushing for it. I have my arguments against it, but if they think this is the direction it's going to go, this is the only way it's going to happen.
If this is going to be a thing, there's massive infrastructure, and this is just one step that you're going to see.
Because that's what Alberta's lacking right now, and that's where electric vehicles in most of Canada have not been adopted, because for anybody traveling more than within the city limits, you can't charge. There just isn't the options available.
Yeah, there's Canada's a big country. We travel a lot of distance.
Yeah.
So keep an eye on it. If you're seeing the construction starting over there, who knows, perhaps sometime in the new year. Directly in Penhold, of course, this last weekend we had Bolorama, and I saw a few pictures of that, and I heard the party late at night. Yeah,
I only live a few blocks away, and as soon as it was right around that 7:00, I'm like, they've gotten going, and I could hear them announcing riders and on, and my wife said that she heard them still going later that night.
Yeah, I was thinking more like 11 o'clock. So, I think they still had party going on.
I'm assuming it went pretty well.
Yeah, it's all cleaned up now, but from all I've seen from the pictures, it looks like it was well attended.
Good.
Looked properly organized. Like the pictures look like a legitimate rodeo. So good for them for putting that on.
It's impressive. I'm still impressed that they could bring in dirt and fences and everything else and run a rodeo there and then clean it up, and you drive by and you never know anything happened.
No, I could be. I think this should be a good recurring event for Penhold. Make a nice, get a bigger one going on. Speaking of bigger ones, of course, we got the Calgary Stampede coming up
little step up.
A little step, yeah. We're jumping from Penhold to the Calgary Stampede, but every Stampede has to start. Some rodeo has to start somewhere. But we're not talking about the cowboys and the bull riding, but instead we're talking about the other feature attraction, the food.
And I have never been to the Calgary Stampede, but every year you hear about the food, and I think that might almost make it worth going just to check out some of these bizarre street foods.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think this is a draw right along with the bull riding and the midway. Like people go for these deep fried heart attacks. Like seriously. So yeah, the reason I bring that up because it caught my eye. The thing that caught my eye in the story was they were featuring was Kraft dinner soft serve, and so this is basically the taste of Kraft dinner mac and cheese in soft serve ice cream format, if you were.
And if we bring up the picture here, it's one of the most almost disturbing looking things. Like it almost looks like cheese in a can, but kind of creamy, like because it's swirled up in that typical soft serve style, but that kind of pale yellow color, and it's just it's weird.
Okay. See, my mind didn't go to like canned cheese or like spray cheese. I can see how you went there. Yeah, but to me, it definitely has the appearance of a nice piled up layered soft serve ice cream like you would see out of a McDonald's machine or something like that. So it has that going for it. It has that ice cream look to it. But yeah, it's got the KD orange.
Yeah.
I can't say I'm repulsed by this one. I'm curious by it.
Yeah, that one doesn't immediately invoke the kind of feelings that some do. It's something that I would be curious to try. And yeah, I've got an ice cream maker at home. Maybe I'll make my own because I'm not sure I'm going to make it to the Stampede. But
yeah, of course. It's like, yeah, you got the powder just to mix it in there, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, so that might be enough for someone. But you know, there's a couple more that I think are worth mentioning. We got Crazy Tongue Pizza, and so if you go to again, I'll put the links up on the website. But it's worth going to this. It's calgarystampede.com, and they have their whole midway food menu, and they got full pictures, so you can see what these are going to look like with descriptions and everything. So Crazy Tongue Pizza, vine ripened and naturally sweet crushed tomato sauce, mozzarella cheese, slow braised AAA Alberta cow tongue, natural pineapple, caramelized onion, and Baja chipotle drizzle. I didn't know you could get AAA Alberta cow tongue.
Cows have a big enough tongue. It's
like how do they what's the difference between like a single A cow tongue and AAA? Am I really gonna know difference?
I'm assuming that's a rating on the cow that the tongue came from, not the tongue itself.
No, you have to go along with this. I want to see the grading system for cow tongues. Like someone's gone along and then put in the criteria required to hit these marks.
If you're going for tongue, don't buy the cheap stuff.
That's right. So yeah, you got that. You got tongue pizza. You want the next one there? Which one striking you?
Okay, well, some of them just sound amazing. They don't go off on the bizarre. Cajun fried cheese curd poutine.
Yeah,
who wouldn't just love that?
It's with curly fries even.
Yeah, a nice Cajun curly fry, and it sounds excellent.
Yeah, they got that. They got deep fried Oreo mini donuts. Oh, there's actually one. There was Black Forest. Yeah, Black Forest mini donuts.
That just sounds so good.
And
it looks amazing. Like you've got the mini donuts covered in like chocolatey drizzle stuff and the cherries.
Yeah,
it looks amazing.
I could go for that one. Now, of course, you might need to wash that down.
Which wonderful drink do you want?
Yeah,
with this?
I think we need to let the audience know about Bad Breath Lemonade,
because that's what everybody wants.
Yeah. Okay, so here's the description, and tell me if you can't taste this just by a description. Like seriously.
Oh, no.
So Bad Breath Lemonade is it's described as refreshing ice cold lemonade with a smooth, delicious garlic and caramelized onion finish.
It starts out so good. Like everybody loves a good, fresh squeezed, refreshing lemonade from the fair. Like those fresh squeezed lemonade stands are amazing. And then you end it off on this wonderful note of garlic and caramelized onion.
Yeah, as an aftertaste. So it's the one that just lingers there.
Yeah.
Oh man, like I said, that gets stuck in the back of my throat already. Just reading that.
Yeah.
Oh man, but yeah.
And then for the kids, you've got Pop Rocks popcorn chicken. So your chicken nuggets,
with Pop Rocks on it,
can fizz in your mouth.
like what kid is gonna turn that down? So you got that one. I think though, if you're really going for the heart attack, I think a good candidate would be the glazed donut grilled cheese. So this is it says a signature 4-cheese blend sandwich, a signature 4-cheese blend sandwiched between a glazed donut with the choice of your favorite protein to drive your taste buds crazy.
That actually sounds really good.
I know some is yeah.
But you know that if that's actually a decent size, by that last bite, you're going to be feeling it because you're eating a donut fried up with a pile of cheese.
Yeah. Oh man, but yeah, there are a lot to go through. There's some ones that will. Yeah, we're not gonna spoil all of them, but there are some that include insects. I'll just mention that.
Yep.
But there are also a lot of other really good ones, pretty sweet varieties. Cotton candy noodles. I'll just say that they have cotton candy noodles. You'll have to go look at it. So the Calgary Stampede is coming up. Maybe you're not into the whole bull riding thing or the midways. I think the food's got you. I think they have a good selling point with
and
a lot of this
anybody's
food.
going, feel free to bring me back some mini donuts.
That's right.
I'll take any of those varieties of mini donuts they've got going on here.
Or at least leave us a review. Yeah, if you go down there and you try one of these, let us know how it went for you. Especially if it's one of those bold ones. I'm curious to see how those go down. All right, so we started the show with the Battle of Alberta. There's in fact 2 Battles of Alberta going on, it seems. And this one is breaking basically as we record this episode. But the results from the UCP leadership review came in this evening.
And this is the leadership review that was supposed to be in Red Deer and then got so overwhelmingly reserved. Like so many people saying they were coming that they expanded it into the mail-in vote, which is why we're waiting until now.
Yeah, we should have known about this about a month ago. But yeah, so initially they booked a room for about 2,000 people, and they went, when they had 20,000 people registered to show up. So we'll just mail you your ballot. Yeah. So that's what they did. And so the ballots were returned and the ballots got counted, and it was revealed this evening, like I said, as of this recording, that Jason Kenney had received just over 51% of the votes. Now, there were just over 34,000 people who voted. So these are UCP members. And remember, initially they're looking to get 2,000 in-person votes.
So that's 15 times what they expected initially for attendance. I guess 17 times.
Yeah,
what they initially expected for attendance.
And so, this is the. Especially compared to what they're aiming at, this is the clearly the voice of the UCP membership. It's not just the 2,000 that could make it to Red Deer. Yeah, so over 34,000 members were able to vote or did vote in this. I think there's some 59,000 total UCP members, and so Jason Kenney got 51.4%. Percent of the vote to the question, do you approve of the party leadership? Or I think do you approve of the party leader? And 51% said yes. And so rounding, it's about 49% said no. Now, so technically that would say that passes the UCP party's constitutional requirement. If it's less than a majority. 50, if it was less than 50, he would have had to have resigned. But since it was over 50, not required to. Though when you do these leadership reviews, it seems, according to some of these articles, you're looking for more of the 75-80% range.
Yeah, when you're hovering right on the 50% mark
of your own
within your own party, the people who have paid for membership, it's not a good sign for your long-term potential with the party.
Yeah. And so with that, having received only 51%, Jason Kenney has decided to step down as UCP leader and as a result as premier. And so going forward, the UCP is going to be running a leadership campaign, hopefully fairly soon, because I think, we're in May now. Yeah, I think it's within a year. We're going to have a provincial election.
Yeah.
So this is going to be making it tight. This is going to be really interesting.
Having to run the leadership race to get a leader of the party in time to get things settled and ready for the provincial race or election. It doesn't give a lot of time, and it doesn't have a lot of stability within the party. Though, of course, that being said, with only a 50% support, just over 50% support, they weren't in a good position anyway.
Yeah, even though Kenny only got 50%, I'd be surprised though if those 50 who voted against Kenny would vote for the NDP. It wouldn't, I don't think they would go that far.
But would it just fracture the vote?
Yeah, maybe they just don't vote, and that's enough to allow the NDP to run up the middle. Or I guess there is no real middle in Alberta politics. They just run up alongside, I guess. But yeah, so it'll be interesting to see how this plays out over this next year. Because the NDP, like the last election, it looked like the NDP is going to get wiped out anyways, just by the backlash from their one stint. But their support has not stayed low.
Yeah,
over these last 3 years, they're is certainly in the fight for the election.
Yeah,
especially when you look at the polling of the younger vote, those under 35, under 35 or under 30, I can't remember the article I was looking at, are still solidly in the NDP camp. Sorry, there's just a little side note. Just I gotta let people know. I think in that same article, it mentioned how those under 35, 30% thought the NDP could do the best job at addressing affordable housing in Canada. Like I don't know how you think of how you think Socialist Party can lower affordable housing naturally. They can do it artificially, but then the country collapses under the burden of taxes and regulation and everything like that. So the NDP will come in and just say your house is worth this much, and that's how much you have to pay for it. It's not going to be any good for the economy. But yeah, I can't believe how naive some young voters are when it comes to voting in NDP to help economic and housing situations like that. Anyways, that's a side note. Now, I guess on this leadership vote, I guess there's kind of 2 points I think that come to mind. First, Kenny had mentioned at the beginning of this whole leadership review that he would stay on as leader if he even just got a slim majority. Like, I think he literally said, even if I get 50 plus one, I'll stay on. And then here he gets 51 and he's gone. I think this is kind of an example of how a lot of people, or why a lot of people didn't like his leadership. He would say this one thing and then do the exact opposite in many cases. And as situations changed. So like the obvious one is the vax passport.
Yeah.
He initially said he wasn't going to do anything, or that was not going to be a thing in Alberta. And then situation changed and numbers went up, and lo and behold, here's the vax passport.
Yeah, he would make very hardline kind of statements.
Yeah, that's right.
That didn't give him leeway to adjust as the situation changes.
Yeah.
And so he makes a very hardline approach in one statement in one direction, and then he's forced to break that when the situation changes. Instead of being a little more open about it and saying that at this time or anything like that, he just would say, I will not do that. And then he's forced to either break it or make a really bad choice.
Yeah.
And so he kept putting himself, kind of backing himself into a corner with no options.
Yeah. Like I appreciate kind of the definitiveness and the firmness of the decision, And whereas a lot of politicians are whole wishy-washy and
Yeah.
not really saying what they're going to do. But unless you're going to stick to that, stick to your guns on that. And when you're making such clear-cut calls, like we will not go this way, you have to stay by it. Otherwise, you're no better than the wishy-washy. In fact, it looks even worse.
Yeah.
So yeah, he didn't. There's a number of different examples that come to mind, or at least kind of that I can think happen in that way that a lot of people have found unappealing for his leadership style. And so yeah, there's I like decisive leadership, but if you're gonna make the decision, stay the course then.
Yep.
Otherwise, yeah, it's gonna come back to bite you. And then the other thing is, of course, whenever a party leader steps down, resigns, retires, all his political enemies all of a sudden say, "Oh, what a great guy he was," and give him the old send off, congratulatory work send off. Good job. And of course, we get that from Rachel Notley. She tweeted out saying, "I want to thank Jason Kenney for his public service. There are obviously many things about which we don't agree, but that doesn't negate the time and sacrifice that goes into taking on the role of premier." My question is, why can't they be that collegial all the time?
Yeah, the way they treat each other while they're indirect competition or indirect debate is certainly nothing resembling that.
No, like there's a difference between vigorous debate and kind of this play acting that goes on so often.
Yeah.
And when you read that kind of statement, that sentiment that Notley puts out, and again, this goes on both sides. It just happens that Notley's on this side of it, but it feels like a break in character almost. It's like, what? No, I thought Jason Kenney was like the enemy and scourge of the earth. If I'm following what you're saying all the time, like there's nothing good about what Kenney does or about what the political opposition does. And yet here it's like, oh, you actually found something nice and polite to say about him. Well, why can't you have that kind of pleasantries at least? Like, you can have respect for your opponent even as you vehemently disagree with them, but it doesn't seem like there's any respect during those kind of dialogues.
It's somewhat natural in humanity. Like, there's a saying, don't speak ill of the dead. As soon as somebody's left, so let's just apply that to politics. Don't speak ill of the politically dead.
Right,
like,
yeah. This is a political funeral, basically.
Yeah, they can't speak badly about somebody once they're no longer a real opponent.
Yeah.
And so we do the same thing in our everyday life. You don't speak badly about the grandmother who died and did some horrible things in her life. You can't speak badly,
or at least
about
not
that
the
person.
funeral. Don't do say
Yeah.
at the funeral.
So in a lot of ways, that's really what this ends up being. It's just
in some ways, right?
You can't speak badly now that he's been disavowed by his party.
Yeah, but I just can't help but feel like things politically would be so much better
for sure
if this was the kind of dialogue. Yeah, at least some show of mutual respect for your opponents.
Mm-hmm.
But sadly, yeah, it only seems to happen when you lose the election or have to step down or retire. But yeah, so we're going to talk a little bit more kind of about this whole political landscape and the way that the dialogue goes, the political dialogue, and kind of this contrast between wanting to really needing a government that you can trust, and yet a government and politicians that just seem to have no interest in actually looking trustful or trustworthy, I should say.
No desire to be trustworthy.
Yeah.
And not even putting on a front of being trustworthy.
Yeah, it's the they put on a smiling face, but it like I said, it just looks like they're putting on a mask. It's just not a real thing. Mm-hmm. So there's been a lot of kind of, if you will, fallout from the Freedom Convoy from February, And so there's obviously the public inquiry is starting to get underway. We're starting to ask questions about why decisions were made, what went into the decision-making process. And so both sides of the aisle are trying to make political hay out of it, of course.
Yeah.
Now, so before we get directly into politics, though this isn't very far away from it, the interesting story that came out about Tamara Lynch. She was one of the main organizers and faces of the Freedom Convoy.
Yeah.
So she was initially arrested just before Ottawa was cleared out, the streets of Ottawa. And she ended up spending 18 days in jail before she was released on bail. So she was charged with mischief, counseling mischief, obstructing police, counseling to obstruct police, counseling intimidation, and intimidation by blocking and obstructing one or more highways. So no, it's those were the charges. So we're not talking about heinous crimes here. And yet she was still required to spend 18 days in jail. Finally, she was released on bail. And part of those conditions was that she's not allowed coming back to Ottawa unless it's for like court appearances. I think she's under kind of the recognizance of a friend who has to keep an eye on her. She can't go on social media. And as well, she is not allowed to verbally, in writing, financially, or by any other means support anything related to the Freedom Convoy. All right. So it's within that context that the Crown prosecutor, so the government basically, is trying to get her put back in jail, and for breaching these bail conditions. The reason is that the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms, the JCCF, is hosting a kind of an awards gala, fundraising gala, and part of that is they're going to give Tamara Lynch an award for, and according to this article, it says that she inspired Canadians to exercise their charter rights and freedoms by participating actively in the democratic process, calling the occupation of Ottawa a peaceful protest that awakened many to the injustice of COVID lockdowns and vaccine mandates. And so just by participating in this ceremony, or at least it hasn't taken place, this is just, she's promised to be there, I think. And so just that alone, the Crown is trying to get her put back in jail as a result. This still feels like a lot of political weight and pressure being put onto this for those charges. Like there's even question, like, and so on the flip side, her attorneys are trying to actually get some of the bail conditions removed, particularly I think the social media on charter grounds. So this is similar to, I think, the pastor Arthur
Pawlowski,
where he was required to say, he had to put in some disclaimer against his position. I can't remember the exact wording of it.
Yeah, but they had a specifically worded thing that he was supposed to put on anytime he spoke or wrote about the
lockdowns,
or the lockdowns and vaccine stuff,
mandates. Yeah, and so that got thrown out actually.
Yeah,
and so I think similarly here, they're trying to get some of the conditions released off of Tamara Lynch here. To me, this feels like a lot of political weight and posturing going on here, unfortunately, at her expense. And we talked about this a little bit. I think it's just mentioned in passing how the whole court system is set up to drag on for so long with so many different stops along the way, so many different procedures in place, and not to mention just the lack of judges, that these drag on and on and on. And unless you have an organization like the JCCF, though I'm not sure they're exactly representing her, but unless you have outside financial support, you feel the pressure just to give in.
Yeah, it's an incredibly unfair system when you've got the government, which is ultimately unlimitedly funded, against an individual who, even if they are in the right, doesn't have the funding, the time, or the ability to fight it.
Mm-hmm.
It can drag on forever, ruin their entire life, and the government isn't fazed by it.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think it's an angle of the courts that a lot of people, most people probably don't even interact with the courts, thankfully, but particularly in serious matters. But in many cases, yeah, it's the length that's this the compounding factor when it comes to court cases and whether or not you take the plea deal or defend your innocence.
Yeah.
That's a tough choice that a lot of people have to make. So yeah, like I said, that's part of the fallout from this whole freedom convoy. Now, on kind of more directly involved in the politics, and particularly around the public inquiry is centered around getting to the bottom of the decision making process regarding the Emergencies Act. This was kind of the nuclear option for the government to put on strict restrictions on Canadians, particularly those that were involved in that they thought were involved in the Freedom Convoy, particularly gave extra powers to the police to move people and tell people where they can and can't go. And the other big one was to get directly involved in their bank accounts and freeze bank accounts. Like just imagine yourself having your bank account frozen for any length of time. Like how quickly would you feel that?
I know, and I've read stories and take it for what it is. There may be some of it that's been a bit embellished, but people who only gave $50 to the convoy because they felt like they agreed with the cause and wanted to support it, and suddenly their bank account was frozen for weeks.
Yeah.
And you can't pay bills, you can't do anything. Your whole life can fall apart really fast if you don't have access to your money or ability to even get your paychecks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. Like, just think about it. It's you whip out that bank card like without thinking about it. But yeah, if you can't access that funds, think about how restricting that would feel. And this is all done just through the banks themselves doing it.
Yeah.
And with very little due process, if my understanding was correct on that, you would just find yourself locked out of your bank account and not really sure what process to go through to get unfrozen.
Yeah.
So that was the Emergencies Act, and so that's what the public inquiries kind of flush out. How did and why was this put in place? Was this appropriate? Now, one angle though is that there is this that the Conservatives are playing up, and I think the Liberals have a little bit of a case that the Conservatives are pushing this angle a little bit hard, but nonetheless, I think you'll see at the end we're kind of talking about the government and mistrust, and the mistrust that government activity tends to bring up. And so the Conservatives are kind of playing this angle up about a possible military surveillance plane that was flying over Ottawa. And so the Ottawa Citizen has a article kind of detailing what was going on with this plane. And what was happening is the military had scheduled some training exercises for a new surveillance plane, or at least a surveillance plane that's a model of what we are going to get from the U.S. later on. So this isn't even actually ours. It's a private contractor who's doing this training with the military. Now I say that because on January 27th, there was a directive. This article says that stipulated that Canadian Forces vehicles and personnel were to avoid the Ottawa protest, and the Royal Canadian Air Force planes were not to fly over the Freedom Convoy demonstration. And this was to try to avoid any perception that the military was anywhere to be involved. And you can understand why.
Yeah, you don't want it escalating in that way.
Yeah, and so you can see just this alone is so that was put on January 27th. And so after that directive was put out, the plane still went up. And so part of the argument was, well, that was for military. This is a private contractor. It's kind of blurry. All right. And then the other question is, well, okay, it could fly the surveillance plane could fly anywhere around the Ottawa region. But the one researcher has tracked it, and it was kind of in a more suspicious surveillance pattern over Ottawa.
Right.
Like Like I said, all this. So this is what the conservatives are kind of picking up on, right?
Yeah.
You can see how there's handles there for them. But my main point is not so much whether or not the military was surveilling Canadians. It's more about kind of how this was handled as a result of questions being brought up about it. So the article says that when questions were first asked about the flights, National Defense tried to avoid being linked to the aircraft. Then the department acknowledged that the flights were part of military training involving intelligence gathering and surveillance equipment. Like right there. Like, why are you trying to distance it? Like,
yeah,
what do you? It's just fodder for conspiracy and questioning what's going on here.
Yeah. Yeah, if they had just admitted that, if they really were not surveilling and they just said what it was to begin with, there'd be a lot less to base this argument on. Yeah. But when you look at it and they're trying to distance themselves, they're trying to deny it until enough evidence comes forward that they can't, that just, like you say, it's just adding to the fuel for the conspiracy theorists.
Like there might not be any fire there, but you're not doing a very good job of convincing me there isn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it goes on. It says only after military sources revealed. It was only after military sources revealed the aircraft was being operated by Canadian Special Forces that National Defense acknowledged that link. After an article appeared in this newspaper, the Ottawa Citizen, other sources emerged to provide details about the January 27th RCAF directive that prohibited military flights over the Ottawa protest. And then the L'Obitelier said that the directive was issued to reduce the risk of generating a false perception of CAF, Canadian Armed Forces, activities, personnel, and presence being associated with domestic event at the time. So not only did the Defense Department kind of say, no, that wasn't ours. Oh, wait, yes, it was. But then it was only after more articles came out that they mentioned that there was actually a military directive that's saying there shouldn't be any military activity or flights in this area. So there's kind of two levels of deception going on here, or at least secrecy. Like, why do this? I don't get it. Like, what's the need for the secrecy? Like, this is you want to cut down on all these conspiracy theorists and misinformation. This is the exact way you don't do that.
Yeah, this is just giving them data to work with, or it's really just leading them on to build these theories and think that the government or the Air Force was directly involved. Yeah,
like why not just jump to the immediate transparency, or at least give me the excuse, let me look into it kind of thing. But it's more than that. It's just, why the secrecy? And I don't get it. So it's like, and this is the military. Like, we need to be able to trust military command, like as much as we trust the government. Like, we have to be able to trust the military leaders in charge. And yet this does nothing to help support that. And then, and so, like, okay, what are you hiding? Maybe there's nothing, but maybe you're just trying to hide your own incompetency. It's like, you don't have to do that. We already know that most of the government is incompetent about what it's doing. So why is my question? Why the unnecessary or apparent unnecessary secrecy? It does nothing to help cut down on misinformation, on conspiracies, or build trust in the government or military.
Mm-hmm.
Now, of course, as I said, the conservatives were all over this. And again, you can see why, with all these kind of what's going on here and half statements and corrections. They're all over Justin Trudeau in question period over this. And he denied it, or at least I shouldn't say he denied it. He explained it as it was explained. It was a training exercise. Yeah. And quite honestly, maybe I'm naive on this point. Like, okay, I'll take your word at it, but the way it was handled, it makes it really hard to.
Yeah.
But anyways, so it says Prime Minister Justin Trudeau confirmed the flights were part of military training, which again wasn't what was initially said. But anyways, they were part of military training, but said the plane was not involved in surveillance of the demonstrators. Again, this is a question, or this statement is brought into question about the flight pattern of the surveillance. Like, don't do this to yourself. This is just, I have no support for the Liberals, but don't do this to yourself. And then it says he stated the questions from Conservative MPs were dangerously close to misinformation and disinformation.
So what do you call the information presented by the military when they're saying that they weren't connected to it, when they're saying that it wasn't, that there was a directive that weren't flying over the city and so on? Like, if you're referring to the questions from the Conservatives as misinformation and disinformation, what do you call the statements from the Air Force?
Yeah. This is like, to be again completely honest, the questions from the Conservatives, as I was reading them, do kind of make it more presumptive that surveillance was actually going on.
Yeah.
Than there is actually proof of. Again, there's a lot of questions about how this was handled. So again, it's not completely disconnected from reasonable inquiry the way it was handled. But nonetheless, there is no direct evidence that surveillance was going on. But so when the government calls out such questions as misinformation and disinformation, that's it doesn't ring as sincere.
Mm-hmm.
It's one thing for government or for politicians to speak half truths and spin the truth to their side, otherwise known as lying. But anyways, so I'm not really critiquing that component, though. That in itself, just be more forthright with each other, and this is where the whole Notley thing comes in. Have some respect for your opponent.
Yeah.
Talk to him truthfully instead of trying to question him with your own spin, and then he spins back with his. You're getting nowhere. It helps no one. But anyways, so I'm not really critiquing that. What's going on here, and the National Post is kind of doing the same here, and I'll get to their article in a second. They're pointing out the hypocrisy of a government who's claiming to be who claims to be so against misinformation. And so we've talked about how Bill C-11 is out there. That's the one to regulate the internet. Yeah. And part of that is to allow this digital privacy commissioner to go out and kind of make sure everything on the internet is on the up and up and can take down pages and websites if it's deemed to be misinformation or disinformation.
Yeah.
So the government is on one side saying, we're combating this scourge of mistruth and misinformation out there. And yet when we look at how the government handled the whole freedom convoy and the language that was used around it, that's where the hypocrisy is.
Yep.
Now here, I think it's worth kind of defining a couple of terms that we've been using over, or at least I've been using over: misinformation and disinformation. And I think these are just general definitions. I don't think there's anything special. Misinformation, I think is adequately defined as statements presented or believed to be true, but are in fact false.
So it's like an unintentional, to some extent unintentional. So if I present something I believe is true, I'm not intentionally trying to deceive you.
Correct.
But it is misinformation. I'm mistaken with that information.
Yeah. And so this is often used to describe people who've put out, who've critiqued the vaccine mandates or vaccines themselves.
Right.
With, yes, and I think in all areas, there's people who try to twist the information and not maliciously either. I think a lot of people who are against the vaccines, and think that there's some sort of conspiracy or questioning about their development. I think a lot of them are putting out information that they believe to be true.
Yeah.
I don't think this is a part of some sort of grand conspiracy to undermine government, even though that might be the consequence. But it's not malicious in that way. So it's misinformation. They believe it to be true, though in fact it's false. Disinformation, though, is I think statements that are made that are known to be false, but are presented as true. This tends to be more kind of what you think of when it comes to like spies and counterintelligence, that kind of espionage kind of stuff going on here. you'll have, say, Russia presenting a story in order to foment dissension within another country or something like that, or they'll plant information. And so when someone who's presenting disinformation, they're saying things they know are false, but they're presenting them as true. And oftentimes there's a ulterior motive for a result, but it's neither here nor there. I think it's the fact that that's the distinction. Misinformation, the person who's saying it believes it to be true, though it's false. The other one, it's presented as true, though the person saying it knows it to be false. Now, I don't. This next one is kind of my own thinking and process on this. I think there's another category, and this might just be you classify this as political talk. Like this is often how at times it goes, but it's more to kind of fit the whole information category that we've kind of created for ourselves. I consider this category to be kind of negligent or reckless information. So the way I define this as these are statements presented as true without knowing whether they are in fact true. So you say something this often comes out, these kind of statements often come out very quickly or in the midst of, say, a crisis or an event that politicians are perhaps trying to get their point of view across.
Right.
Tragically, in the States, obviously they had a recent spat of shootings, and you see this kind of information going about with gun control conversations. And I think here you had a lot up in Canada. You had a lot of this kind of negligent, reckless information from politicians on both sides. But since liberals are in power, I'm going to pick on them, and this is what the article here does as well. That these were statements that if I had more information about them, perhaps these would actually be classified as disinformation. Though I'll give the people the benefit of the doubt that they are just more malevolent or they're negligent in their use of language and information. They see this freedom convoy, they don't like it, and they have a narrative that they're trying to attach to it. And so whether or not they have all the information to back up the statement serves their preconceived narrative or direction they want this thing to go in. And later on, I'll kind of double check to see maybe if this was true or not. The National Post lays out a few different examples of it. And so they kind of connect this to Trudeau's interaction with the surveillance planes. It's not exactly true what's going on there, or exactly known because of the way it was handled. But the other things that kind of came up, at the time of the Freedom Convoy, it says that Liberal MPs often repeated the claim that the demonstrators were fueled largely by foreign cash. And then here's a quote. It says that the illegal occupation in our capital city by a group of centrally coordinated individuals who were terrorizing the citizens of Ottawa for 3 weeks with the stated intent of overthrowing the government, in fact, had the majority of their funding from foreign sources. This is a quote from Liberal MP Ryan Turnbull on February 20th. Well, they've had since now come out and in committees found that 88% of the $10 million that was raised on the GoFundMe page was in fact Canadian sources.
Yeah.
Hardly.
Yeah, certainly not
majority
foreign. Like that's 12% that came from outside the country.
There's no way you can see this majority in any sense of that. But that's just not, and that doesn't end up getting corrected. So at the time, like, what was he basing that on? Like, what did he have information? Did he have incomplete information? So, like, maybe this is misinformation. Maybe he actually thought this was true. But we have no idea. But it
seems more likely that, like you say, it's more likely a negligent where he just had this idea that would really push forward with kind of their narrative and threw it out there as though it were fact.
Yeah. Later on, it says liberals were also involved in repeating the inference that anti-mandate protesters had conspired to burn down an Ottawa apartment building. In February 17th common statement, justifying the need to invoke the Emergencies Act, Liberal MP Francesco Sorbara mentioned the attempted arson of a downtown apartment building in Ottawa. The article continues. when Ottawa police finally charged 2 men they believed to be responsible for the February 6th attempted arson. However, they wrote that there were no reason to believe that men were involved in any way with the convoy protest which was going on when this arson took place. So this was a fire that was started in kind of the foyer lobby entrance area to an apartment building.
Yeah.
And this Liberal MP jumps on board and says, well, we need the Emergencies Act because of this attempted arson. Did she have reason to think that this was actually linked to the Freedom Convoy protesters? I don't know. At best, it would seem negligent. Or, like, she doesn't back it up with any evidence.
Yeah.
So I either have to say this is like it. Like if I am truly being cynical, I go to this is just plain old disinformation. This is just lying for your own motive or political motivations.
Yeah.
You know, but this is the kind of stuff that keeps coming up. May 2nd, Public Safety Minister Marco Mendicino told the House of Commons that the idea for the Emergencies Act came by way of law enforcement. Quote, at the recommendation of police, we invoke the Emergencies Act to protect Canadians, he said. During testimony to MPs last week, RCMP Commissioner Brenda Lucki had praised for the government's decision to invoke the Emergency Act, but poured cold water on the notion that the police had requested it. Lucki said it was ultimately the federal government's call to invoke the act, and the government or the RCMP were merely consulted. Again, this kind of fits into this might be more of a spin / misinformation, but it's certainly not a correct statement.
No.
Especially in the context of, well, we did this because the police told us to. It's
And
one thing to say the police would like us to, or even, you know, that we consulted the police on this matter, to saying the police asked us to do this. Those are different.
Yeah, and it's not just changing of information that's based on the information they had at the time. Like, there was nothing to indicate that. It's really just a made up statement.
Yep. And yeah, those are just 3 there. Like, often there are a lot of the conversation around, you know, the presence of swastikas and a Nazi flag were used as examples, like as classifying the whole thing. Though there are certain reasons to think that those were maybe plants that were put in there, or ironic, or flags that were brought in as reflecting what they thought of the government, and not the protesters, but yet they're used by the government as more justification.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's hard to claim you are so high and mighty on this issue of misinformation when those are just a few examples. You got Jagmeet Singh, the NDP leader, talking about how this was a white supremacist rally, essentially, or led by white supremacists, I think is the quote he put in there. Again, there's no evidence that let's put it this way, be as careful as I can, even though I think this is going beyond what needs to be. There's nothing saying, or there's nothing thinking that there's nothing to prove that the Freedom Convoy was motivated toward white supremacy ends.
Yeah.
Like I think that's being as kind as I can about that. I think you can make much stronger statements against what Jagmeet Singh said about it. But so I know this isn't like new, but it's just or a new thing when it comes to politics. It just seems like, why can't we have more, let's put it this way, political funeral talk?
There we go.
Yeah.
Then don't speak ill.
Yeah, that's right. Why can't we just speak honestly towards one another instead of having to go through this spin cycle? And I think that's being as kind as possible. All this misinformation, all this disinformation, and claim that just because, you know, the other party's asking you hard questions, that is therefore disinformation, or why can't we just talk more forthrightly with one another, particularly when it comes to political issues and in politics. So all of this, you know, I think it ends up producing this erosion of trust. And I think this is really important, particularly when it comes to entities as powerful as the government and the military, as we looked at. like there's fewer and fewer things that kind of bond us together as Canadians. There's just less and less, it seems like, common values, or at least we've got to the point where we don't even focus on that anymore. And part of that is driven, I think, by these examples of mistrust. Okay, I lean more. I would classify myself more than a conservative, and that person over there might be a liberal. And based on what I see in the federal legislature, or in the Alberta House of in the federal House of Commons and the Alberta legislature, I know how I have to treat that liberal.
Yeah.
Like I just can't trust him. I got to go through all my points, and he's going to throw back his points, and we just can't have a good conversation. Or if we do, we can't talk about politics. And one thing about politics is it often touches on our fundamental beliefs about how society and reality should be run.
Yeah.
So we're left with this kind of shallow interaction if we can't talk about those important things. And not so there's that aspect. So there's this erosion of trust and this need for being, I think, more forthright with one another, particularly about these things. And I think I was listening to a talk by Jordan Peterson, and he pointed out kind of when he was in counseling people and how significant betrayals are. So, he might be talking to someone whose spouse had cheated on him or on her, and how crushing that is. Like, it's not simply that someone you trusted, lied to you or something like that, or someone who didn't tell you the truth. Like, that's one thing, being lied to. But when there's this betrayal that happens, particularly when it's people that you thought you knew,
Mm-hmm.
And that you really rely on, that betrayal starts to it causes you to question your own perception of reality. How, like, I thought I knew that person, or I thought I knew what this institution was about, but they completely went reversal on what I thought was true.
Right.
And so it upends your whole sense of whether or not you can actually trust yourself in what you believe about other people, about government. And just think what that mentality does on a large scale. Like, you're dealing with a citizenry that can't trust each other or the government. And I don't know about you, but that doesn't bode well for a country.
No.
And so I think this is what ends up happening when you look at when government doesn't, when government is so steeped in this kind of misinformation, all this political spin, it causes this betrayal. And it causes us to lose our trust and even ourselves to perceive whether or not I think I can trust you, but can I really? Because of these past hurts, I can.
Yeah.
And I would wish that things like this would be able to be corrected. And it's interesting now with political arena changing in Alberta here. The voters themselves have a chance to pick a candidate that they think perhaps embodies more forthright talk.
But going back to that betrayal, how many people, when Kenny became the leader of the UCP, had that trust in Kenny? They trusted that he was going to be the leader they wanted, and then he betrayed them. He betrayed that trust in the way he led the party, and so you become less able and less willing to trust another leader.
Yeah, and then you just become so cynical towards the whole political process in general, and you just kind of disassociate from that. And how quickly that might translate into other areas of one's life.
Yep.
And so it's I hope we can, when we go to vote in whatever setting that takes place in, is that we're voting for someone, at least we are constantly looking for that. Hopefully we don't give up hope that such people don't exist, but hopefully we can still find certain politicians, people in public life that are forthright
Yeah.
in their talk, particularly at a political level. I must say, I think at least, yeah, I'll limit it to Penhold because I just don't know the other people around. But, I think in Penhold, and this is perhaps the nice thing about local politics is that is you have these much tighter personal relationships with people.
Yeah.
So it's much harder to spin their truth in their faces like that. You have to live next door to these people, so it's a little harder. So, while I don't think local politics is immune to this, I think though, particularly in Penhold, I think it's not a major issue. And so hopefully we can keep going for that. But now we got a UCP vote going on. We got the provincial elections up next year. And then we got, the conservative, federal conservatives are going through their leadership.
Right. Yeah.
Campaigning now. So yeah, that's when I'm looking at who to vote, those who present themselves as honestly as possible are going to warrant at least a second look. It's not that has to be the first step. It's one thing to look at where are you going to lead me. The question is though, do I trust you actually to lead in that direction? Yeah,
you can talk a good game, but if I don't trust that you're actually going to lean that way or go that direction, it means nothing.
Yeah. So I guess look for the most honest politician. That might seem like oxymoron, but I think we have to strive for that. I think it's so important. So often now politicians are is the modern celebrity now. We just see them all over the place, and their language, the way they talk, the way they interact with their opposition, it has to filter down. It has to filter down. And so hopefully we can put better people in those places. Now, with that said, and just kind of wrap up this section, and this isn't an endorsement or anything, but I think it's a video worth checking out. It's and kind of along these lines. Jordan Peterson, again, he recently sat down with and had an interview with Pierre Poilievre,
right,
who's running for the leadership of the Conservative Party at the federal level. And he sat down for an hour and a half conversation with Peterson. And I've listened to about the first half hour or first 45 minutes of it. It's about an hour and a half. And honestly, he at least sounds like a guy who's thought through where he stands on things.
Right.
No doubt there's sound bites and some of the, cliches that there and slogans, political slogans. But there are so few politicians I feel could sit down for an hour and a half and speak substantively about things and deeper things and beyond just their talking points.
Right.
So it's actually it's quite refreshing to hear an intelligent politician, a politician who at least if he is wearing a mask, he wears it more convincingly than most others. Like I said, not an endorsement. In fact, he's pro-choice, so that to me is a really hard thing to get past when I'm picking people. But his political philosophy, I'm really excited by, and it might be worth looking into and listening to a potential leader of one of the parties and potential prime minister. And yeah, I think that listen to the way he talks, and it just sounds different. It sounds more straightforward, at least comparatively. So that might be one example of kind of the politician and the political talk that we're looking for. All right, so let's wrap up the show with another movie review. And if you want, most of these movies that I'm going through are a result of me going through American Film Institute's top 100 movies of all time. So that would be a common theme, though. Victor Frankenstein is not in that. It's a good movie. It's probably not top 100. So from last week, that was an outlier.
I don't think there were many critics or fans that ranked it really high, but I thoroughly enjoyed the movie. And
yeah, it's a good movie. But yes, not top 100 though. Not that good. But one that is in the top 100, I forget what ranking this one's been given, but it's in the top 50, if not top 30. But this is King Kong from 1933. So this is the original, black and white. And it's remarkable. So this is let's see, the directors. Though in 1933, the directors weren't as a big deal as they are now. It was more the producers that were kind of the main guys that kind of got the notoriety. But anyways, it was directed by Miriam C. Cooper and Ernest B. Schoedsack, I guess. And it stars Fay Wray, is probably the most famous name in movies, or at least famous name in this movie. Robert Armstrong, Bruce Cabot. I'm not as familiar with those guys, but I'll give them their due. So, this movie King Kong feature, and again made in 1933, is kind of follows this ambitious movie director who has a reputation for like filming anything, and willing to go anywhere for the shot. And so he's heard about this mysterious Skull Mountain, and on this island that only he knows, and he gives the map and and so they sail off with his crew and gear off to this island, and so behind this huge gate that's been established, or that this primitive culture has put there to keep out everything else behind it. He knows that he's heard about this legendary creature that's back there. He wants to film it, but his ambitions obviously will probably lead to terrible consequences, as we probably know, even if you haven't watched King Kong. Excuse me. It doesn't go well. And so this movie features some remarkable stop motion by Ray Harryhausen. And really, I really need to look more into him, but he is kind of the VFX godfather of movies. So anywhere I forget how far he went up. He had to. So this is 1933. I bet you it was in the 70s or the 80s. He kept going. But yeah, he's a legend in kind of the movie effects, and particularly stop motion animation. And so King Kong is all stop motion, and it's composited in with live action, and done actually convincingly well in many cases, particularly for 1933. Usually expecting kind of this kind of screen in the background, kind of janking around a little bit, disconnected from the foreground, but they hold it pretty steady. The stop motion is a little rough at times, particularly for modern sensibilities. All this has to be in that kind of context, but nonetheless, the amount of work that was put into it, because not only do you have King Kong, and one thing I didn't realize was how many monsters there are actually in this movie. You have King Kong, and this world is not just Kong, but it has it's basically dinosaurs. Have you watched the movie Journey to the Center of the Earth?
Yes.
I think any version of those ones. But I think those ones are filled with a whole bunch of different creatures. Isn't there like a dinosaur world or something like that?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah.
So it kind of feels like that. So you not only have King Kong living on this island, but you have a T-Rex. There's a Stegosaurus going on.
Right.
You have pterodactyls. You got this kind of weird snake lizard thing, and all these end up having battles with King Kong through it, all in stop motion.
Oh wow.
And it's. You can see kind of the lineage of King Kong in say like things like Jurassic Park. For example, the King Kong actually like puts a lot of people into his mouth and starts chomping on them.
Oh,
it's not gory or anything. But I didn't expect to see that.
Yeah,
like that was like Jurassic Park. Like that was terrible how the monster came in. Like, but here they got the guy's being crushed inside his mouth. You see his teeth and. Around the guys that he's eating up and then spitting out or throwing away. So yeah, I wonder how graphic this would have felt in 1933.
Oh,
it
would have been a
surprising.
shock to
it was
people.
surprising. Yeah. So yeah, he battles King Kong, or not King. Or he battles T-Rex in there, and you see him ripping his jaw, very similar to what we see in in recent ones with King Kong versus or Godzilla versus Godzilla versus King Kong.
Right.
You see similar moves in there. So you see some lineage. But anyways, so a few thoughts kind of on this movie kind of popped up. So as they go to the island, there's this primitive tribe or culture there that look like they're in the middle of some sort of ceremony, and you learn that they're preparing basically a human sacrifice. They refer to her as the bride of King Kong. So it seems like this is almost some sort of annual ritual, and so they're preparing to send this girl into the wall or behind the wall as a sacrifice. And so the crew shows up, interrupts that scene, and it becomes the crew or the primitive tribe sees the girl that the movie crew has brought along, this blonde, fair-skinned actor, and say, "Oh, she would be even better."
Yeah.
And so they end up picking her and then putting her in as the sacrifice, and that kind of sets off the rest of the movie as King Kong takes her and looks like she's about and takes her back to the lair, and the rest of the movie crew and sailors are all chasing after, trying to rescue her. And so there's this kind of interesting contrast here between the primitive and civilized cultures that are going on here. Of course, one culture sees no problem with human sacrifice, and here's the, if you will, the civilized culture, if we can say that kind of thing now, going in and trying to rescue the damsel in distress.
Yep.
I think the interesting kind of component here is the director himself. Remember, he's this super ambitious guy, and near the beginning, because of his reputation and the potential danger, like no girl is willing to go along, or no one's willing to find him an actress to be in this movie. So he basically goes out there and finds Fay Ray's character, and kind of sweeps her away to be part of his movie, and is really prepared to use her as kind of bait in his movie.
Right. Yeah.
And so the question is, how far distance is the director from the rest of from the other primitive cultures? He's willing to sacrifice, so to speak, put this female in danger for the picture. Yeah. That's kind of one element of it. The other one that comes up is this kind of whole idea of chivalry, and the other kind of contrast is the beastliness of King Kong, and how he is kind of attracted to the beauty of the Fay Ray's character of Anne Darrow is her character's name. And so you think it's going to be a sacrifice, but but King Kong feels himself like he wants to keep her. Yeah. Not to eat her or anything like that, but he's attracted to her, intrigued by her. In fact, there's, as far as the compositing goes, there's a really interesting scene where you have the stop motion of King Kong. Actually, they make it look like he's interacting with the live action of Fay Ray's character, and you can see the outline of the composite of it. But it's really interesting because they're filmed entirely separately. Yeah. When King Kong is holding Anne Darrow's character, you see how they actually turn her into a stop motion character as well. Oh yeah. In many cases, yeah. So it's a stop motion actor or female in King Kong's hand in many cases, but there's one scene in particular where he's stop motion, she's live action, and they're trying to make it look like there's interaction between the two. Right. So it's very clever for its time. But it's the beastliness and the interaction with the beauty of Anne Darrow, and I think that's paralleled with with one of the lead sailors on the boat. He's first introduced as this kind of rough, gruff kind of sailor, yelling out orders, and does not like the idea of a female on board. They're just inherently trouble on board. Yep. There's no place for them, and you see how the beauty of her wins over the kind of the macho beastliness of the sailor.
Right.
And I think that's clearly intentional. Um, and and it's that and so he becomes attracted to her, and he's kind of the main guy to go kind of in the strain of a good knight to go rescue the princess.
Yeah.
And that's something that is just harder. You don't see that as much anymore in the movies, or if you do, because it's clearly a damsel in distress kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like she's just utterly helpless, and the man has to come help her. And you see in today's movies the shift away from that entirely. In fact, you can even see in Jurassic Park, they have a little brief scene about whether or not Laura Dern's character should go turn on the power panels, or the old guy, I can't remember his name. Anyways, the male should go do it. There's a brief scene. She goes do it. She goes and does it. Does the dangerous thing. And so, but I think movies like this still remind us that I think there is something intrinsically good about a man wanting to protect the female human, female species doesn't seem right, but the if you will, the politically incorrect term, the weaker sex.
Yep.
There is something I think society loses when men aren't allowed to be strong and protective in that way.
Mm-hmm.
And you end up with soft men. And that as much as we in society's culture don't like to hear it, I think that is a poisonous conditions for a healthy society. You need the strength of men to push things forward. And here in these old movies, you still see a recognition that this is the way, this is a good thing. This is what a man should be doing. And it's interesting, and it happens. Yeah, it happens partly because of the power of the beauty of the female that does it.
Right.
It's so there's this duality going on there. It's not that it's not that women have to become men and men have to be all the characteristics of females. It's not that. It's the interaction between the differences that drives it.
Yeah.
If men didn't find women attractive, we would be in a very different society.
Yeah.
There is something good and something we should acknowledge about the beauty of females that men are attracted with. That in and of itself is not a bad. It can be perverted. That's not what I'm talking about.
Yep.
But there's a healthy sense in which men are attracted to females by their appearance, and I think if you, I don't think this is becoming, again, I'm hesitating because I feel the pressure of culture on this. That I think there's a lot of females like the security of a strong and protective man who's willing to be that protector. It doesn't mean you have to, the female is this kind of helpless princess who can't do anything herself. That's not what I'm talking about. But there is something that is good for men to feel the responsibility to be protective about females, particularly his wife, and his family. That's good. That needs to be recognized. And I think a lot of that is forgotten now. And it's these old movies that still kind of retain and remind us of that still exists and is still a good that needs to be recognized still. Yeah. So if you get the chance, check out some of these older movies, particularly King Kong. Like I said, it's from 1933. And if you are having trouble finding it, I will return it back to the library soon. And so, like I said, if you're looking for some of these older movies, and sadly, a lot of these streaming services just don't have a good selection of these classics. The library has been a great resource for renting out or borrowing, I should say. You don't have to pay your annual subscription or annual fee, and you get access to all these movies from across the province. Like I borrowed, I borrowed a movie all the way. Like you can borrow a movie from any library in Alberta for free.
Yeah.
And they'll bring it right to the Penhold Library and you just go pick it up. So yeah, so King Kong 1933, worth checking out. All right. With that, why am I saying we? I've droned on long enough. I'm not going to drag you into this. I dragged you in at the beginning. I called you out. I'm going to call myself out at the end here. I've bent your ear long enough. If you've lasted this long, thank you so much. I appreciate it. As always, leave a comment. If you think I've talked too long, then by all means leave that comment or any other thoughts that we've maybe spurred. Let us know. Other than that, thank you again for tuning in, for listening, for watching. My name is Brian Constantine.
And I'm Michael Rowland.
And this has been Penhold Talk Radio.